All right, let's take a look at the rest of these problems for a rhombus. So in number 3, it says find x in a rhombus LMNP, all right, which is pictured over here to the right, and they tell us LM is 2x. All right, so this side is 2x, and LP is going to be x plus 10. All right, now we know one of the key ideas of a rhombus is that all the sides are congruent. So that makes this a quick setup because we're going to set those two sides equal to each other because they have to be congruent for it to be a rhombus. All right, and then we're going to go ahead and solve that algebraic equation. So I'm going to subtract x over, and when I do that, I'm going to have x equals 10. All right, so I always want to look back and make sure I answer the question because remember, sometimes they'll say find x, other times they'll say find side LM. All right, so in this one we look back and sure enough it's just x, so we won't need to plug that back in. But again, if they ask for side LM, you just plug it in and you would get 20. All right, so that's number 3. So we're going to go on to number 4 now, and it says use the rhombus from number 3. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just recopy it down here so we've got it to work off of. And again, it doesn't have to be a perfect sketch, just enough so that we can label pieces accordingly. We'll go ahead and draw in that with a Q there in the middle. All right, so it says find y if measure of angle 1 is y squared minus 54. All right, and angle 1 was right up here. It's this angle right in there. All right, so the first thing that we know is in a rhombus, right, diagonals are perpendicular to each other, right, which means that they intersect and form a 90-degree angle. So all of these angles in here are 90 degrees, which means angle 1 is 90. So we're going to say y squared minus 54 equals 90. We'll add the 54 over. All right, and then we're going to get y squared equals 144. Then from our Algebra 1 days, we know that we can take the square root of both sides, and we get y equals plus or minus 12. Now, you're going to notice that I'm ignoring the plus or minus here at first, but we want to look back and see if it really matters whether or not it's negative. So angle 1 is y squared minus 54. So whether y is positive or negative, we can actually use that in this because it will still give us that 90-degree angle. So we're going to say plus or minus 12. All right, I know in geometry a lot of times we throw out the negative, but the y itself isn't representing a side here, so technically both of these are totally valid answers. All right, so if I go into B, B says P and L is what we're trying to find. All right, so P and L, so this angle over here in this corner, all right, that I'm marking red over there. So we're trying to find that angle. If MLP, so MLP, this whole angle over here, all right, is 64. All right, well, what we know is in a rhombus, a diagonal bisects opposite angles. All right, so this top half, which I'll label 1, and this bottom half, which I'll label 2, all right, those have to be the same size. So both angle 1 and angle 2 would have to be half of that 64, or 32. All right, so we're going to get a 32 in that spot and a 32 in that spot. But we remember from our properties of a rhombus, that means these two angles over here are both going to be 32 as well. All right, so right there we get our answer. Measure of angle PNL equals 32 degrees. All right, if I jump down to C, C says MN is 10. All right, so that's this side here is 10. Find LP. All right, so LP is this side here. So I can go ahead and just use the fact that if it's a rhombus, we know it's a parallelogram. On parallelograms, opposite sides are congruent, so LP would have to be 10 as well. All right, we could also think of it as it's a rhombus, so all sides are congruent. Therefore, all the sides here are 10. Really, whichever way of thinking of it helps you the most. All right, so that takes us through 4. And looking at the last one for rhombus here, we've got number 5. It says use rhombus DLMP with DM is 26. All right, so the full length of that is 26. So we can bisect it to 13 and 13 because in a parallelogram, diagonals bisect each other. All right, then it says to determine whether each of the statements is true or false. Justify your answer. All right, so when I look at this, all right, it says OM is 13. All right, that is definitely a true statement there. All right, MD equals PL. All right, so in a rhombus, we know that it's going to be perpendicular. All right, MD and PL would be perpendicular. We know they bisect each other, right, but we don't get that they're congruent. That was one of our properties of a rectangle, not of a rhombus. All right, so this one is a no or a false. All right, and again, that's because it would have to be a rectangle for that to be true. All right, and then in C it says angle DLO, so DLO, this angle up here. All right, and LDO, LDO, this angle up here are congruent. All right, and nothing technically forces those to be congruent here. If they would have given me an angle over here, then I definitely could have said it was congruent, but I can't say it's congruent with those two up there. We also don't know that LO would be the same length as DO, and if they were, then we would have those two base angles congruent. All right, but based just on the fact that we've got a rhombus, this one would be false as well. All right, so that takes us through our rhombus problems. I hope that answers your questions. I'm going to be back in the third video, a short one about squares, and then you'll have a short homework assignment tonight. So one more short video section on the last one. I'll be back in a second.